All right, everybody, welcome to Gen X News. I am live here with you guys, live on X, live on Rumble, and live on YouTube. So feel free to subscribe to one of those channels. We've got Jerry Cthulhu in the room and Mr. Incognito. Welcome to the show, all from YouTube. Now, if you are wanting to support the channel better, of course, you can share the content and subscribe, but subscribe on Rumble. I get way more views there. Like I always say, I have close to 1,900 or 1,850 subscribers on YouTube, and the views are just horrible. I used to get really good views when I did the Secret Door podcast, and it's just not happening. So it's Gen X on Rumble. And feel free to go to the website, which I have to update pretty soon, probably tonight, genxonx.com. All of the links are there. So, of course, you can listen to the show live with me on Rumble, YouTube, or X. Or there's an audio podcast, which when I get to it, I upload it. Everything should be up to date. The show we did last night on Hollywood Babylon, it's all edited. It's in the system. It's ready to go. So by Saturday, the audio should be up on Podbean, which then distributes it all over to Apple, to Stitcher, to Spotify, whatever you like. It's all on there. And some of the links are on genxonx.com, or you can just type in Gen X News on your favorite platform. And if it's not on one of your favorite platforms audio-wise, send an email. The email's on the website. I believe it's genxonx@gmail.com. Let me know what platform you listen to your audio podcast on, and I'll try to get it up there. All right, so got a little banner here at the bottom. It's telling you our schedule. Next week, Dr. Dean Bertram comes on about UFOs. The 16th, we have KT Truther with politics. The 23rd, we have Kieran Woodhouse on paranormal documentary he's doing. On the 29th, we have author Dan Klefstad's Origins of the Vampires we're talking about. And of course, on October 30th, Bob Antone. We're going to have like a ghost story campfire happening just before Halloween. I'm not going to do a show on Thursday on Halloween because I love handing out the candies to the kitties, so I can't do both of those things at once. So me and my dog Petey will probably, I'll put a costume on him and we'll get dressed up and we'll hand out candies to the little ones. I love seeing their costumes and, encouraging them and tell them how good they look. It's so much fun. So it probably won't be a Halloween night. There's not going to be a show, but that's okay. And then, in November, I've already got a guest lined up to come on and talk about post-elections. I'm really nervous about the crazy chaos that's going to happen there. I'll have to tell you, I am nervous. Now, next Tuesday, there's not going to be a show. My guest canceled, and I do have some yard work stuff I have to get done, so I'm not going to do one next Tuesday. My guest was Jack Danger, and we were going to talk about political stuff happening. And unfortunately, for Jack, he is in North Carolina, in Asheville, where the most tragically, of the hurricanes happening. There's, there's a lot of areas affected. And so we're going to be talking about that on this show because there's a lot of people, and I hinted at this on my live stream of the J.D. Vance debate. I hinted at weather weaponization again, kind of similar to Hawaii, but this time it's a hurricane, and we're going to talk about that. I'm going to show you some evidence that doesn't necessarily prove, but it points to the idea that there's something fishy going on, especially in Asheville, North Carolina. And please pray for all the people affected by the hurricane. We give prayers for Jack Danger and hope that he's okay. And if you're going to donate, I'm going to tell you this right now. If you're going to donate, don't donate to FEMA because a lot of weird stuff's happening with FEMA. Donate to some local organizations that's helping people. I'm going to go into some of the stuff that's happening with FEMA and the hurricane. And then I'm going to go back over Hollywood Babylon. Our show yesterday on Hollywood Babylon, I had very talented film director and friend Gary Parsons come on. and we kind of went through it, but I felt he was really just scratching the surface of Hollywood and the issues. And my guest, he seemed to think there wasn't that much propaganda, that you could either choose to go or you couldn't choose to go. And I think at a certain level, that's right. And I used to hear that all the time in the 90s. People say, well, you could turn the TV off. You can choose to go. And I disagree. I think it's a lot more nefarious than that. And I want to show you why. And I want to kind of undercover Hollywood a little bit more than that. And that doesn't mean I totally respect Gary. He's coming at it as a film lover and somebody who makes films, and I'm coming at it from a different perspective, and I want to show you the level of propaganda that's been going on for a long time and tied into other things. We're going to have a look at that. So stick around. Jerry says, it's hard to find your channel if one is not subscribed. Lots of Gen X hits in the search. Ah, I see. That's a good information to know. That's good information to know. Yeah. So, guys, make sure you're subscribed. Go to the website genxonx.com and subscribe to the channels, whether it's YouTube. Hit that subscribe button right now, whether it's YouTube or Rumble. You guys subscribe. I recommend Rumble. There is a few glitches on Rumble. You know, it doesn't all happen like magic, but that's really good to know. Thank you, Jer, for putting that out. Ivy waving. Hello, Ivy. Thank you for joining in. So, I think I got to share my screen. I've got a little video here. I'm just going to show you a clip of just one clip of just a minute amount of the devastation that's happened with the hurricane. Here we go. I believe this is it here.
Oh my God! Holy shit!
That was just a small clip of how it had affected the highway there. I've been to North Carolina twice, and it's a beautiful state. And the forests are just gorgeous. I had a friend back in 2012. I went and visited. His family were doctors, and they owned tons of property up in the mountains. And they had this like kind of log cabin mansion up there, and it was just very beautiful. And I was, got to go to South Carolina, North Carolina. I didn't get to go to Florida or Georgia, which one day I hope to do. But it's such a gorgeous state. You could see the forest there and how lush and beautiful it is. And it's just so tragic that this is happening there. But there's a lot more to it than just a freak storm, apparently. Now, I'm going to share my screen. Let's check this out. Let's share my screen because we're gonna hit the Twitter. Which ones are my book? Just let me see something here. I gotta find which one's my bookmarks. None of them are on bookmarks right now. Actually, here we go. We'll share this one right here. If it will share. There we go. So you can see it. I like this setup better, except for the background turned into some funky. There we go. Let's do my brand. We want my brand in that background, guys. So as you can see, Pete Buttigieg. Let's listen to Pete. See what he has to say. Here's what he
Our goal
says.
is to make sure that funding is no obstacle to very quickly getting people the relief that they need and deserve. There's also some safety issues that come up. For example, temporary flight restrictions to make sure that the airspace is clear for any flights or drone activity that might be involved in helping to allow those emergency responders to do their job. Our goal is to make sure that funding is no.
That's Peter Buttigieg. Funding's no. They're making sure nobody's allowed to fly drones or do anything, and apparently, this is Jack Danger's post actually that I'm going to share with you. He was supposed to come on my show, and this is his post. He's in Asheville right now, and he writes on X, "Please read and share because this is the real story. Whatever you're being told about how bad it is here in the Asheville area, you don't know the half of it. The following is all true." He says, "Thousands are missing. Hundreds of dead bodies hang from trees as the raging waters subside in some areas. The smell of death overwhelms the living in the areas that are impossible to leave. Homes gone in the blink of an eye. Children ripped from their parents' arms by the angry rivers overflowing the cities. People are trapped on roofs for days while trillions of tons of water pass by their feet. They are without food, water, a bathroom, protection from the sun, or the dead of darkness at night. Imagine being blind but on the roof of a house where at any moment it could be washed away and you either drown or your head is smashed against a tree or rock. That's what they endure. FEMA setting up a camp near the airport where if you can get to it, then you live like a refugee under guard. Feds are threatening to arrest any citizen that uses their own time and money to help. They're confiscating donations and food. They're not conducting any search and rescue efforts for the tens of thousands in the mountains that are not hit by the storms like this. All I can tell you is that the government is not coming to save us. Any citizen out there that has any means, people here need your help. Fuck the government, threat of arrest. These are people's lives and they are letting them all die to confiscate land of lithium. You think you live in a civilized country that's above the fray, above the corruptions of other governments. You have no idea. America is the most corrupt of all." And so that leads me to the whole idea about that it's weaponized weather. And people will say, oh, that's ridiculous. They stopped HARP. They stopped this. They don't have the ability to do that. And that is not true. I'm going to show you some articles on it. Silent Silas has said, if you think weather manipulation is a conspiracy theory, think again. Does Project Cirrus and Project Storm Fury ring any bells? With Hurricane Helene, lithium is the real reason. We have I Am Ken. This is happening. FEMA is confiscating donated items. It's like they want people to die. Rasta Gorilla says, I just got down from the mountains delivering supplies. Family with kids haven't ate or had water in 3 days before I got there. Multiple counties completely shut off from every utility. FEMA is currently confiscating donations and blocking volunteers. I fear we might need a militia to inhibit or stop FEMA. As crazy as it sounds, FEMA is directly confiscated donated items and blocking volunteers from helping, kicking churches out of parking lots, etc. Now, why would you do that? Why on earth would you do that? I don't know. You tell me. Why would you do that? It's very, very bizarre. It is definitely the most bizarre thing that I have seen as of yet. And let me see here. I'm gonna go there. I was trying to add a scene, but it is not. Let's do it on this. There we go. Media. I'm gonna look here. I want to add. I'm trying to add that scene where my image is bigger, but it seems to be not cooperating. So the question is, okay, do they have ability to control the weather? Like, is this a thing? And of course, I'm going to show you where they say, yes, indeed, they do have the ability to control weather. So this is from 2015 from Covert Geopolitics. And it says, the U.S. Air Force and DARPA would like us to believe that they have stopped using HARP in Alaska for research and experiment. Even then, we all know that there are other HARP systems out there in the form of radar communication and surveillance systems that are rigged on top of mobile platforms that are deployable in any international waters around the world. All they need to do is twist a knob to change the frequency of the main wave to the microwave range. For modulated frequency FM broadcasts and increase the transmission power high enough to reach and heat up the atmosphere above the designated target. The technology is covered under U.S. Patent 4686605 on the method and apparatus for altering a region in the Earth's atmosphere, ionosphere, and or magnetosphere. So there's a patent out on this, and they show you the patent and how they use this stuff to change the weather. And they say, update, as of 28th June 2021, FAA issues flight restriction to Galkana, Alaska, where they were doing this. No pilots may operate an aircraft in the areas covered by NOTAM and Galkana. They just say don't go there. So how does this work? How do they control weather? This is what I want to explain to you, because people will think this is ridiculous, but here's them saying how they actually control it, and they're going to apparently show you in this. So for those who have no technical appetite, that would be me, just imagine the same frequency signal used in your microwave oven that cooks your breakfast. So for those of you listening on audio, you won't be able to see this, but it's on Covert Geopolitics. So they say the microwave oven frequency is directed towards, or the frequency is directed towards the atmosphere from the tips of antennas in the array showing below. So here's all the antennas, and they're directed into the atmosphere. In short, the same principle used in the TV or cell site broadcast is being used on these HARP and radar platforms. The only difference in cooking up the sky, as opposed to your breakfast, is that the voltage needed to transmit the same microwave frequency signal is in the range of hundreds of millions of volts, due to the sheer distance that the same signal must traverse between the antenna and the target. So a typical consumer microwave uses 1,100 watts AC and produces 700 watts of microwave power, an efficiency of 64%. The other 400 watts are dissipated as heat, mostly in the magnetron tube. That's what they say about microwaves. So your government's HARP emitter may need 100 billion watts of sheer power, as the patent above has indicated, in order to achieve a specific outcome. There's no theoretical limit, of course, as to how much ego will play into the process. What could possibly happen to the pre-selected region in the atmosphere when enough power is fed to the transmission array? Understand that even an increase of just 1 Celsius in the atmospheric temperature is more than enough to initiate a significant weather perturbation. Bear in mind that all gases move from high to low pressure, and gas pressure is directly proportional to its temperature. In short, if one heats up at least 3 specific locations in the atmosphere, the common center region having relatively low pressure, then those 3 heated points will become the eye of the storm. 3 competing forces moving towards a common region can only be resolved through a downward spiral rotation, the cooler gases being heavier than the former. Depending on the amount of energy being used, the whole process could take days to develop. Chemtrailing and cloud seeding could certainly enhance the process far beyond weather manipulation. Notoriously, these maniacs almost always have multiple goals for every single action. For those who understand frequency modulation, they know that any low frequency signal can be piggybacked into the high frequency radio signal. This means that any naturally occurring frequencies in nature can be modulated into a radio carrier frequency for purposes of broadcasting it to a specific target. They could be using all of our cell phones for all I know. Good Lord. So in short, it is possible to alter human behavior by FM broadcasting brainwave frequencies to wit. It shows you here, delta waves, theta waves, alpha, beta, they can alter our behavior and make us go crazy. So delta, theta, alpha, beta, sensory motor rhythm, gamma brain, those are the good waves, of course, but there is also bands of waves that could induce hallucination, blindness, agitation, pain, and despair. They can make us sick in despair and hallucinate. So the possibilities are endless with this broadcasting technology, prompting Tesla to release it to a number of countries after, oh my God. Yeah, so this is how. This goes on to other effects of radio transmission. And I mean, guys, it's not that far out fetched. It's not that far out fetched. P Hig says, isn't it called FEMA? FEMA is supposed to be the kind of emergency response that goes to natural disaster, but from what I understand, a lot of the money has been allotted to illegal immigrants so they can win the election, and they're really out of funds. They're saying basically for hurricane season. So now what is happening is, of course, they are taking donations. Some have even said that they're taking people's donations and pretending that FEMA's giving it to them when they're not. So it's getting really crazy, and that is it. That is how it's done. And let me see if I can get you that. I'm going to put the link in the chat. It might only show up on YouTube through here, but I'm going to give you a link to this article. I'm going to post that link onto my X profile. So it'll be on my X profile for a while. I'll put that on post. Weather. I'm just putting it simple. I'm not going to share it about, but it's there. So it's right up there for people if you want to check it out. This is how they use radio frequencies to manipulate the weather. It's pretty evil. It's pretty disgusting. But they do it. Now here's the second part of this that I want to go over. And we'll share my thing again. The second part of this is there really lithium in North Carolina, in Asheville, where a lot of this has gone? Is there really lithium there? Is that a real thing? Are people hysterical? Do you have any proof that exists? And of course I do. I have a HuffPost article that I'm going to read to you in just 1 second from 2022 that talks about this very thing. So these people are not crazy. They're not conspiracy theorists. They're not horrible. There is lithium there is lithium, my friends. So this is from the HuffPost. This is mainstream. I could lie or take a spin on it, but the article is entitled "The Lithium War Next Door." A lithium mining startup promised to make a rural pocket of North Carolina a clean energy boomtown, but perceived slights and concerns over water have turned neighbors against the project. So people have gone against the project in 22, and they're writing about this. Lithium is called white gold. I believe that's what they call it. So they're against the project. So they're really outlining that people are opposing it. Here we go. Gaston, North Carolina. Brian Harper opened the door to his back porch, stepped outside, and inhaled the brisk air. Exhaling, he stretched his arm out wide as if to embrace the bucolic scene before him. Moments like this were sacred, and he feared fleeting. On that late afternoon in early January, the sun cast a golden tint over the brown frost-nipped fields behind the Harper family's stately brick home. Just a few hundred feet away was the red barn containing his workshop, where he makes precision gears for clients like Duracell, Dark Container Corp, and Nestle. Harper wanted to catch the last bit of light on his quiet stretch of farmland. So there's a lot of people who don't want to sell their farms so they can access this stuff. Okay. This to me is paradise, Harper said, and all this, when they start mining, will disappear. So they'll take away all that farmland, trash it, and destroy it. Beneath these rolling hills lie what many investors now call white gold. And just beyond Harper's tree line, the mining startup Piedmont Lithium wants to dig up to 4 500-foot deep pits to pull out the lithium reserves that once made Gaston County the world's top source of the soft metal, now used to make batteries for cell phones and electric vehicles. If permits and local zoning change is clear, the way for the project, Piedmont could begin digging as early as next year, making this likely the first major new supply of American lithium since demand started surging over the past 2 years. The mine has become an unlikely microcosm of clean energy conflict starting to take center stage in the debate over how to avert catastrophic global warming. They're trying to avert global warming. They'll probably blame this hurricane on global warming, but they've literally caused the hurricane, and they want the batteries for global warming. These people are insane. This is all insane, convoluted gaslighting. Okay, so to preserve a planet with hospitable weather patterns resembling what we see today, the world needs to rapidly phase out oil, gas, and coal. No. But quitting fossil fuels means dramatically increasing the supply of minerals such as lithium, nickel, and cobalt that make it possible to do with electricity what today requires igniting liquid carbon. And in places from Chile to Serbia, Nevada to now North Carolina, the clashes erupting between mining companies and the people who live near resource deposits are increasingly known as lithium wars and could dictate how that transition happens. Yeah, they'll just blow a storm over them. So here you go. I'll put this also in the chat. This shows you, Huffington Post wrote it, that there is some contention between people who own land in North Carolina and corporations who want it to get to the lithium. And so I've showed you that weather is possible to manipulate, and they've been doing it for a long time. They're calling us conspiracy theorists, but that's what this industrial complex do. And we're going to get into a lot of that manipulation when I talk about Hollywood and Hollywood Babylon. And I mean, this all links. It's all connected. Hollywood's connected to, the corporations, the government, the deep state, the military-industrial complex. It's all one giant, insane, bigger than we've ever seen, crazy house of propaganda. And so, the easiest things to do if you can't get what you want and you're a psychopath head of a corporation or the military industrial complex or whatever it is that's seeking this out, you just, blow in a hurricane and take people out. And it's not funny because there could be thousands of people dead right now. There could be thousands of people dead right now. We have no idea. Trump has donated over $25 million to the funds. And as we know, Kamala Harris, our favorite Kamala, has offered people who really need it $750. Think of all that money that's going to Ukraine, and you get $750 for Kamala Harris. It's hard to have the words to express once you start seeing and opening your eyes actually how evil everything is. If you have your eyes closed, to you that's just a storm. And oh my God, let's help the people. But once you start opening your eyes and reading everyone like Jack Dangers, who was supposed to be on the show next Tuesday, and please pray for Jack and please pray for everybody else in North Carolina. Once you see his post and you see what's happening, and he's telling you, he can see it with his eyes, the government's going to say, that guy's crazy. You need to doubt what Jack's saying. You need to not trust your own eyes. You need to trust us. And it's the total opposite. You should never trust the government. Can I say 100% that's what they're doing? No, I can't. But I'm showing you that these things exist. They want the lithium there, especially in Asheville, in that area. They want the lithium. And there's contention between them and the locals. And the ability to alter or weather, sorry, exists. It doesn't just exist, it's existed for a long time. In the 1800s, like 1850s or 1870s, I can't remember the exact date, they were experimenting, shooting canning, um, um, gunpowder up in the clouds to see how they could affect the weather. This has been happening. So if they were doing that then, I can only imagine what they can do now. Comment from P. Higgs. She's the one being used by the evil people that caused the hurricane in the first place. Kamala Harris? Yeah, she is. I mean, she's just showing up. She doesn't know. She's not controlling anything. She's just the stupid meat puppet. There's much more evil people behind her, and she's a psychopath enough. I encourage everybody, if you want to know more about Kamala Harris, to go over to Candace Owens on Rumble and check out Candace Owens revealing, what a dishonest liar about her heritage and being Black Kamala Harris is. She's a psycho. But psychopaths don't mind acting and pretending and making false identities like Kamala has done. They don't mind it at all. It's not a big deal. So that's my coverage about North Carolina, the hurricane, and the possibility of weather as a weapon, weaponized weather. It's a thing. It's there. It's not only possible, they do it all the time. And they are using radio frequencies. They're probably using frequencies from us and phones and other stuff. They're using the chemtrails and the spraying in the clouds, and they know how to do it. And all they have to do is put certain points in a certain area, and they create the eye of the storm for these hurricanes to happen. And then they can just say, well, it's climate change. It's just climate change, you guys. You guys have to stop driving your cars and buy our electric vehicles and live in 15-minute cities because it's climate change, and it's not climate change. It's weather manipulation as warfare. And so these guys may not have a Death Star. God, they probably will one day, floating up around our planet, but they're using other things like this to do this. And I hope they all burn in hell. One day, I hope there is a place where they have to answer to this. Thousands of people could be dead right now. Bodies, like he said, hanging from trees. Devastation, okay? It's crazy, it's insane, and it's sad. And we're going to get into more covering of Hollywood Babylon. I'm just going to take a drink here in a minute. My voice gets so dry. It's crazy. So what I want to get into now is talking about Hollywood Babylon, and I'll show you how not only are they doing weather manipulations, these deep state military industrial complex are involved in Hollywood, and we didn't get to cover this on the show. The more when I talk to people and interview them, I think I expect them all to think the way I do or know as much as I do about how horrible our planet is, and they don't. They just want to talk about it, film as an art, and that's okay. They just don't understand. And my guest did an amazing job of highlighting yesterday Hollywood Babylon and the director and the filmmaker Kenneth Anger. Really good job, but we're just touching the peripheral of what Hollywood is, and I don't think that his research goes in that direction, so I couldn't possibly expect someone or question them in that, way, because that's not their area of research. So I want to show you, and I've come across a couple of really good channels, a channel by a fellow named Robert Seffer, who is an anthropologist who talks about Hollywood. He talks about a whole bunch of topics. I really encourage you to subscribe to Robert Seffer. That's Sepehr. His channel is really great. A whole bunch of different topics. I'm using some clips from his Hollywood stuff, and I have a bunch of clips from online. Then we're going to talk about Hollywood Babylon and how it is positioned to do social engineering and engineer us not to have children, engineer us to different sexual preferences, engineering us to believe certain, narratives about war, about family, about politics, about anything and everything. And it's beyond just movies. You get into movies, it's print, autobiographies, books, politics, theater. It's in university. It's seeped into everything. It's so devious, and dishonest. But we're going to get right to that. I have a video that I want to introduce you to, and it's a fellow, he's talking about how propaganda really was created, really the good stuff, the best propaganda by the British and America and the British in World War I. I'm not going to say anymore. I'm going to let you watch this clip. It's pretty good. Here we go.
Apple pie. Propaganda at its most sophisticated was perfected, and I mean not just political propaganda, but commercial propaganda. Both kinds of propaganda were perfected jointly by the United States and Britain. You know, in Mein Kampf, Hitler, in his famous chapter on war propaganda, talks about how deeply he admired what a brilliant job the British propagandists had done in World War I, had nothing but contempt for the German propaganda, and resolved to make sure that his own and the Nazi Party's propaganda would be brilliant in imitation of the British, you see? So, how many people does the world of propaganda employ in the United States, if you think about it? I mean, it isn't only people in public relations. It's also people in advertising agencies. It's also people in the world of so-called public diplomacy. It's also people in the world of what we call lobbying. There are countless euphemisms that we use today for propaganda, right? If you go up to a person in an ad agency or a PR specialist and say, well, how's the propaganda going? You know, they're going to be insulted. They're going to feel like you've called them a dirty name. They don't understand that they do propaganda, right? They do propaganda. And the rise of all those euphemisms for it is a direct result of the successful effort to cast propaganda as something that they do in those closed societies. The Russians do it, the Chinese do it, the Iranians do it, the Venezuelans do it, the Cubans do it. We don't do it. We educate people. We provide them with information. And that misrepresentation of propaganda has had the paradoxical effect of making it extraordinarily effective. See, because propaganda works best when you don't see it for what it is.
Okay, propaganda works best when you don't see it for what it is. So it's also as entertainment. So you don't realize it's propaganda because you think it's just a movie, or you think it's just entertainment, or you think it's just a rock song, it's innocent. You don't see it as propaganda because you don't understand the means of production and where it gets produced and who distributes it. You can't see that. You just see the finished product. And what they've done is they've reframed it as, instead of propaganda, it's entertainment. Instead of propaganda, it's education. Instead of propaganda, it's a documentary. Instead of propaganda, it's really good information. But it's all propaganda. Like you said, you couldn't walk in, like when I was trained as graphic design, they told me, my teacher said, always tell the truth about your design, always tell the truth. And so I'm going out there and I'm listening to different graphic designers, I'm visiting print shops, and I'm doing all this stuff for my degree, and I'm realizing that nobody knows how to tell the truth. Like, nobody's telling the truth. It's all lies. Even at the minutest of levels, it's all lies. It's pretty crazy. So you can't, if you tell a graphic designer they're doing propaganda, they'll be like, are you crazy? But I realized that graphic design and getting into that field was propaganda. I realized that while I was doing it. It made me really uncomfortable, and I did not get along with corporate. I went for many job interviews and tried to get in, and I knew it wasn't going to work. And that's probably why my guest, Gary Parsons, because he's an independent and he's an artist and a creative, he doesn't see it that way because he doesn't apply it that way. He is doing it as his art project, not necessarily propaganda, although there could be propaganda in it that he doesn't know. I don't know. But he doesn't see it that way. He's not working for an agency, right? He's trying to be as honest as he knows how to be with his project. So every time now that you see an autobiography and you see these politicians, is something that I learned like a couple of years, just before they're out campaigning or while they're campaigning, a book will come out and they're like, Obama will have one, and it's all bullshit. It's all lies. It's crazy because they're literally following Hitler in his Mein Kampf. You notice they edited his name out there. They've literally following. Hitler said that, Pat, like, here's my autobiography. Winston Churchill, are all doing this. It's part of creating the myth. And my guest talked about that yesterday. that in Hollywood, like Kenneth Anger, they create a myth about themselves. They kind of lie about themselves. And you can see how that works in Hollywood, and because it's all supposed to be fantasy and whatever, but there comes a point where that stuff is really devious, where they're doing it to manipulate, lie to people, present themselves as something that they're not, present a narrative that's a lie, and it is propaganda, whether you want to admit it or not. Now, my guest had this kind of concept that it's okay, you can just choose to go or not to go. And I say that's not true, because I would say that we're being marketed and propagandized right from the time we're born, right to the grave. And I think it's such propaganda from the time you're so young, going to school, the TV, the radio, the newsprint. You're surrounded by everybody who does that. You don't really have a choice. You don't really have a choice. You just get immersed in it from the time you're little. And so I felt like his take on it was inaccurate and a little glib. And I think it's a much more serious here. So I'm going to get into what Hollywood really is, because it is one of the main ways that our society does propaganda. And we're going to get into how that changed and some laws about propaganda that happened, and how someone's asking, what is this? I don't know what you mean. What is what? This is a podcast. We've switched from North Carolina and the hurricane to Babylon, Hollywood, and propaganda. That's what we've done. So let's see. We're going to pop a video up here. This is Jordan Maxwell, and he's talking about, in his mind, what Hollywood is.
Tools in the hands of the masters who run this world is Hollywood. Hollywood is an incredible story. I've said this, and maybe many hearing me now have heard me say this, but I'll say it again, that the white man's establishment comes from Europe, and northern, southern, well, all four, northeast, south, and western Europe, even at the time of the Roman Empire and before, that whole section of Europe that we call the center for the white man's presence on the earth was quite literally ruled over. Ancient Europe was ruled over by a priesthood called the Druids, and the Druids were they were the ministers, the priests, the judges, the lawyers. They were the religious leaders. So there was a priesthood that dominated Europe. It still does. Europe is still a Druidic country, and America is a Druidic country. And unless you understand the Druidic system, then you're never going to figure out what's going on in America and England. But one of the most important symbols in the Druid system was a magic wand, like Merlin the magician.
Okay, so he goes on to say that got clipped off. He talks about the wand, and magic wands were made out of wood from the holly tree, Hollywood, right? And so he links that. The Hollywood is the magical wand. There's a whole bunch of symbolism happening there, and that's what Jordan Maxwell once kind of talks about, that Hollywood is really represented as this magical system. And you can bet lots of creepy stuff's happening in Hollywood, but we didn't touch that. There's probably lots of satanic rituals, sacrifice. There's definitely child trafficking happening. We know there's sexual assault. We know the stuff with P. Diddy that's happening right now, where it's like a gang. They're, intimidating, murdering, offing people, having weird sexual parties. We know there's weird, soul cookout parties happening with that Marina Abramovic or whatever her name is. We know strange things are happening in Hollywood. But just the name alone is linked to something in Druidic, and that's that concept there. So it's really interesting to see. Well, let's keep going on, because I want to make sure. Well, and it even extends to rock and roll singers. It's not just that, it's music. Everything is invested in this. It's music, it's book print, it's film, and all of those directors that we idolize, whether it's Spielberg or Lucas, they are smart. and they know how things emotionally affect us, and they know how to create these really powerful narratives like Star Wars or Indiana Jones or something like that. Now, let me just see here. I want it to get into... We're going to get into some MK Ultra stuff. We're also going to get into Laurel Canyon. But what I wanted to highlight to you, see if I can do this in a second, is, and I think this one gets into Laurel Canyon. It shows what Laurel Canyon was. And this clip kind of talks about the... it's something that was called the Smith-Mundt Act. It was done... Let me look this up for you. I should have had this up. I'm sorry. I looked it up earlier. I'm going to tell you what the Smith-Mundt Act was. So, the U.S. Information and Educational Exchange Act of 1948, popularly called the Smith-Mundt Act, so this was done after World War II, was first introduced by Congressman Carl E. Mundt, January 1945. The act was developed to regulate broadcasting of programs for foreign audiences, produced under the guidance by the State Department, and it prohibited domestic dissemination of materials produced by such programs. So basically what it was saying is they could produce basically propaganda abroad, but they could not disseminate it to Americans. Right? That's basically what it's outlining. So it goes, the original legislation authorizes the U.S. State Department to communicate to audiences outside of the borders of the United States through broadcasting, face-to-face contacts, exchanges, including educational, cultural, and technical, the publishing of books, magazines, and other media of communication engagement. Funding for these activities comes from other legislation passed by U.S. Congress called appropriations. But it specifically says it prohibits domestic dissemination of these materials. They can only do it to a foreign audience. And that's really key because in 2013, Barack Obama did away with that. He basically said they could disseminate it within the United States. People will call that a lie, say he didn't say propaganda was okay, but he does away with that. And I think I have a clip that goes into this with Laurel Canyon. I hope so. I hope this is it. Let's check it out.
Built this top secret movie production studio in 1947. Military training films and top secret Department of Defense documentaries were produced, including a series on above ground nuclear tests in Nevada. That said, celebrities like Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley are also said to have worked there, signing non-disclosure agreements. Oh, and Timothy Leary lived across the street. For decades, a so-called anti-propaganda law prevented the U.S. government's covert broadcasting arm from delivering politically deceptive programming to American audiences. But in 2013, that came silently to an end with the implementation of a new reform passed under the Obama administration as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, which included an amendment that nullified the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948, which explicitly forbids information and psychological operations aimed at influencing U.S. public opinion. Critics claim that the act also unleashed thousands of hours per week of government-funded radio and TV programs for domestic U.S. consumption in what has been criticized as a green light for politically motivated social engineering and U.S. domestic propaganda efforts. This is why we see the same exact...
Okay, so I'm going to show you the fake news stuff and the video clips of news disseminating it, but what it means is basically the propaganda that they use. They said, oh, we have to put it to the enemy. We have to give it to Russia. We have to, Russia's the... Now they're saying the American people are our enemy and we're going to turn it in and we're going to use the propaganda on them. That's essentially what Barack Obama did. He's a piece of shit and he's a scumbag. Sorry, he is. I don't care if you like him. It has nothing to do with the color of his skin. Why I'm saying that, it has to do with he's a horrible, horrible person. He's totally destroyed America by that. So he's basically nullified the Smith-Mundt Act and made it so that it's not protecting us. Just like when they did the Patriot Act, so they could spy on everybody. We have these corrupt, evil globalists who are turning in on American people more and more and more. So that means that not only can they do it with news, but they most certainly can do it in Hollywood and other things. And we'll get into Laurel Canyon and how that affected people, and how that the government uses media and movies and music to infiltrate certain movements, like an anti-war movement, to make them look like junkies or drug addicts and shut it down. They're trying it on MAGA to make MAGA look like white supremacists and Nazis, and it's all just, FBI agents and CIAs dressing up as Nazis. And they do all sorts of crazy stuff, including weaponized weather. And now they can lie about it. They can just lie about what's happening with all these weather things, and they can push climate change and whatever they want in the news, because they're allowed to now. They're allowed to legally turn propaganda in on their own people. It's really devious stuff. It's pretty disgusting. But here we go. Let's listen to this clip about Laurel Canyon. Check it out.
Some really weird coincidences that so many of the rock stars had people in the military industrial, basically were military intelligence. And you think, well, what's the big deal? Oh, these just rebelling people. It says, well, no, there's so many garage bands at the time in the 60s. How come a high proportion of them, of the successful musicians, were from military intelligence? So the odds and probabilities are beyond the reality, right? Beyond the bell curve.
Yeah.
So this unraveling, you started to see there's a pattern that the hippie movement was basically an intelligence operation. Okay, the intelligent rock stars, and then part of this discovery was this lab here. Now, this lab apparently was nestled in the hills. I guess he found out so many rock stars lived here, and I think this was the real kicker for him, is when he found out that this was here. So he put the two and two together, that the rock stars are part of intelligence. They lived in these hills as a means of secrecy.
Yeah.
And as part of the secrecy of these hills, this is part of the military intelligence complex. So you had military intelligence children and a military intelligence facility. Now, apparently, this thing was so self-contained, you could, from start to finish, start a movie and process a whole movie. All the facilities were here to do so.
Really? Like Hollywood's quality movie?
Hollywood self-contained set. So they have the secrecy. People like Walt Disney, Marilyn Monroe had clearance passes on here.
Wow, Walt Disney. Can we see how big this place is? Is there any more beyond this?
I think it's an acre or two in floor area. What's that? Not enough. There's some people that think we're getting suspicious.
Okay, come down.
Okay, come on down. Curve into the hill, and now it's owned by an actor.
Oh, this is privately owned now?
This is privately
This still
owned
says Air Force Base.
Yeah, I know.
I wonder how big it is. Like if there's more that we can't see.
Well, we can put people's links to it, but you can see the windows right up against the top there.
Oh yeah.
There's that. And it's kind of like 40s. Yeah. See, even there's a radioactive site.
Yeah. When was it built? You know.
I don't know, Brian. We'll just
probably 1940s.
Yeah, let's just not get into too many details. Let's just video it.
I think weren't the nuclear explosions from?
I think they said they did.
They did the film editing here.
Film editing for nuclear explosions, which.
Yeah. So, yeah, amazing. So they could have done all that here.
That's what I'm saying. That's the.
Is this still the complex here?
Yeah.
Wow. So it's quite a big spread.
That's what I'm saying. All this high fencing is the. You see, there's more buildings.
Yeah.
You see, it's a fairly large complex.
So I wonder what it means if it's privately owned today. Is it like a house?
Well,
I wonder what they're using it for.
What it means is the military, I think, closed it down in the 80s. Sorry, in the 60s, I think.
So they probably just sold it.
Yeah, they just sold it. No, there's a guy named Jared Leto that apparently owns it. So.
Interesting. So I guess they didn't need it anymore, so they sold it.
Yeah.
But they took all their secrecy equipment with them.
Yeah. So maybe we can. Stop, Brian. This is private driveway. We better not get into this part.
Okay.
Now. But as you can see, it's a fairly big complex. Spread out. I don't know how many acres. Like I said, we maybe throw you some links about how you can see the four sides of it very clear. I found a really good one today, and it's a very interesting history. You would never have known what it was until Mr. McGowan and others started to put two and two together.
Yeah.
And say it's all part of the mystery of this Laurel Canyon.
That was just...
All right. So Jared Leto actually owns Laurel Canyon now, and he's a creepy weirdo of sorts. But you had a whole bunch of band members, like the Mamas and the Papas. You had like, what's her name there? Janis Joplin. A whole bunch of people were coming out of Laurel Canyon, and like they said, they were linking Marilyn Monroe. There's a lot of production happening there, and it's linked. The military is running it. A lot of people actually believe, and I haven't done the research on this, so I can't say yay or nay, that a lot of the atomic nuclear weapon sort of footages was actually staged, and they did it there so that they didn't believe that they really had nuclear weapons. It's kind of like the moon landing. I don't know, maybe should ask people in Japan. They, because something happened in Japan, but I have to do more research on that, so I don't want to comment too much on that. But there's this conspiracy theory that indeed, they did not have actual nuclear weapons, that they put a lot of the staging here and edited footage for that here. Now, I have another video clip, the last one I want you guys to check out. He goes into more detail about what people came out of Laurel Canyon, what happened. And what it does is it shows you that it's not some sort of innocent, Hollywood's just a business. It's corrupt. They're having the casting couch. That's it. There's sex stuff going on, but it's okay. You shine your light bright, and you had your time, and then you just go on, and, it does happen, and there's a casting couch sort of thing. It's actually more nefarious, and it shows you that it's meant to spew lies, and not just good mythologies about country, but propagate really horrible things that I think changes a country's soul, or it produces stuff so these globalists can go on with the wars. Like, let's take an example for a Hollywood movie. What year did the first Top Gun come out? Let's look that up. I'll look that up right now. It was the 80s. 1986. So the first Top Gun starring Tom Cruise came out. And it's a very pro-America, yeehaw, go get him kind of, it's pushing sort of military-esque idea. And my husband, he was a young guy in those days, and he had joined the military, joined the Navy, and I'm sure he loved Top Gun at the time. But if you sit there and you take a look back and you look in retrospect and you kind of say, well, what happened? What happened? Why would they put that movie out? And there's an idea that the CIA and the military industrial complex was involved with that movie. There's lots of funding. They'll fund movies like Top Gun. 4 years later, of course, we had the Gulf War starting. So a lot of times they put out movies that are like fun-filled, and they want your patriotism, or they want to heighten you up for some sort of agenda they have. And then, a war won't come out right away. But eventually, within a few years, it will. And that young generation that watched that war, they might look at their birth stats like, hey, there's a lot of young men. We got to get them geared up, pro-America. A lot of people probably enlisted because of Top Gun. And then they know they've got people, and they can, this is how they do it. And it's so suave because it looks like just entertainment. It doesn't look like a recruitment for military. But yet it is. And people say, oh, well, you can choose to watch it or you can't. No, sorry. It's so evasive in all of culture. It disseminates out. You'll see someone dressing in those sunglasses and a bomber jacket like Tom Cruise, and you can't avoid it. And if you're young and you don't understand, which most of us are, and you've been manipulated by movies all your life, you're not going to realize, and you'll argue with your parents. That's the other thing that Hollywood has done. They've actually put in that family division. They a lot of it shows teen angst, and validates that they should be mad at their horrible parents. I hate that shit. But something like Top Gun is a really good recruiting method to get people to support war so subtly. And then the war doesn't happen right away. And what happened? What happened just 4 years ago? during the pandemic. They made Top Gun 2. And now we see a lot of war stuff happening once Biden and Kamala got in. You got to look at it this way. That's how manipulative. And you think it's innocent, but people are going to die. That's why I disagreed with my guest when he didn't think it was that big of a deal that you could choose to see it or you couldn't choose to see it. And I think that's wrong. And I think the powers that be know it's wrong. They know that this is going to affect everybody. Now let's get on to that clip I was talking about. And I just wanted to show you one example of how pervasive a movie could be, a very successful movie. And his idea is, well, some flop, some don't, And I'm like, yeah, but they know. They know. They have control of everything, and they know what makes a good movie. And here we go. Let's check this out. This is more of Laurel Canyon.
There was actually a specific group in Laurel Canyon in LA in about 1965. There's the other book about Laurel Canyon that's even crazier than Chaos. There was a guy named Vito Polikas, and he had a group called the Freaks, and they were like a nonviolent version of the Manson cult, and it was all these young girls, and they basically would go to clubs, and they were the ones to do the beads and the hair and like all the leather and like all the hippie stuff. Like they got that rolling. And so, like they were in Laurel Canyon, and in Laurel Canyon, it was like ground zero. There was like this moment where it's like Jim Morrison, The Doors, and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and Frank Zappa, and was it John Phillips, was the Mamas and the Papas, and the Byrds, and the Monkees, and like all of these like iconic bands of that time, basically catalyzed over about a 2-year period in Laurel Canyon. The conspiracy theory in this book basically is that the whole thing was an op, and it was a military intelligence op, and the evidence for the theory is that there was an Air Force military propaganda production facility at the head of Laurel Canyon called Lookout Mountain, which today Jared Leto owns and actually lives at.
Yes, I'm looking something up because I want to make a point about my next point before we end the show. And you see, he's just basically reiterating how a lot of these so-called rock stars, Jim Morrison, come out of these places, and they're quite possibly structured by the military-industrial complex, the CIA, whomever these agencies are that's doing it. They're really constructed because they want to make, at the time especially, they wanted to make the peace hippie movement, they wanted to terrify the population about it. They wanted to make you afraid of hippies who were against war. So they infiltrate that with characters like who are like drug addicts and dying, and maybe they even kill them. Who knows? I mean, they could create the whole narrative, create their death. We don't know how vast it is and how deep and devious it goes. But Charles Manson, that was the final straw. Hollywood backed away from this kind of hippie sort of thing, and people were afraid. And he was probably an informant or a patsy put in by the FBI. Now, today you see a lot of, and people may get offended by this, but there's really is a trans agenda and a gay agenda that's been going probably on slowly since the 80s now. I don't have the documents with me, but they know that you're not born with a gay sexual orientation. They know that environment influences that. They've done studies on this. The gay activists knew this before they were putting this out in the 80s, and they've concealed that because what they want to do is population control. So they've pushed out the sort of gay agenda for population control. And that's what a lot of the films are about. Love is love. You can be a transgender. You can do this. It's a really twisted, sick way of population control. They know you're not born gay. Usually it's trauma or social conditioning that does it. And they know this. There's the documents to prove it. Right from the 60s, they were plotting a lot of this stuff because they want population reduction. And I've got to look something up because I want to show you guys something about population from, I think Elon Musk had posted it, but I'm going to find it. It's showing you the fertility rates and what's going to happen. And it's really disturbing. But it might take me some. I thought I put it on my bookmarks, and I guess I didn't. But it might take me a little bit to find it because I'm not sure exactly when he posted it, but I'm going to find it because it's telling that their actual gay agenda for population rejection is actually working. Whew. It's working very well. And I'm pretty sure it was Elon Musk that posted it. Gosh. I can't find it. Of course I can't. It was talking about fertility rates and what that actually meant for reproduction and population collapse. And it's not good. And I don't want to guess it. I want to tell you the specifics, but I was sure that Elon Musk had posted it. He's posted a lot lately, so maybe I'll have to do some double scrolling. Oh, shoot. I had meant to save it. I had meant to bookmark it, and I guess that I didn't. Yeah, this is going on like I had this whole idea when we were talking yesterday that like I said, I wanted to go in a certain direction, but it's not very fair of me to ask a guest to go in a direction that his research is not about. And his research is mainly, being an artist and a film lover, his research wasn't about how devious some of the stuff is. And like I said, if the deep state wants to do it, if the military industrial complex wants to do it, if this is the twisted goal, it's going to end up in movies. And they're like, well, movies flop. Yeah, they do, but they make tons of movies. So eventually you're going to watch something and something's going to hit and something's going to stick. They don't just make one movie. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. They don't just make one TV show. I think their defenses of this, in my opinion, are pretty weak. Friendship diversity. Oh my God. Do we really need friendship diversity? I don't know. Yeah, I can't find it. Oh, wait a minute. Here it is. I found it. All right, we're going to share a screen. I found it. It took me a little bit of scrolling, but here it is, guys. Let's add a scene and share this so you can see the data and how well and effective the gay agenda, the trans agenda as population control has worked. It's worked so well that there could be a lot of populations that are actually extinct in the near future. It is, I'm sorry to say, a little bit disturbing, quite a bit sad, but I'll read it to you. I just need to have a drink because my voice is getting dry, so just let me have a drink here. Okay. Is this it? Oh no, this is about immigration affecting birth rates and affordability. So immigration affects it. This isn't it. Shoot. I thought it was it. Well, I'm so sorry. That was about how immigration and excessive immigration ruins birth rates. So Elon Musk is very much into birth rates because he sees this as a big potential problem. Basically, what it was saying, if you have a 1.6 fertility rate, that will lead to a 50% decrease in population. America has, I think, 1.64 or 1.67. China is like 1.2. And North Korea is like 0.7. That's like 80% to 90% population decrease in the next couple of generations. That it's not sustainable. It's complete and total collapse. Now, in China, I don't think they had this gay agenda thing going on, and I think they're vastly against it. But they had the one-child policy. And I think one of their big issues is they have way more boys than girls now, and a lot of their girls want to work. So pushing women into the workforce, they wait longer, and then they start having fertility problems, and they don't have as many children. And China has way more boys. I don't know, I guess they're throwing them in the military. Here, it's the same thing. But people, if you haven't noticed, Jen, when the numbers jump dramatically with people being gay and trans, that's not like some sort of evolutionary thing. That's too fast. Evolution doesn't happen like that. You don't just turn gay. It's usually chemicals, propaganda on TV, them telling you that you are. Teenagers always go through angst. We all remember it. And then they're like, well, if you don't feel like yourself, if you're not feeling good about, having breasts or developing it, probably because you should chop them off and be trans, or maybe you're a lesbian. And they watch all of this stuff in the movies, and it tells them what to do and what to be. And to say that you could just choose not to see it, I think that's bullshit. I think it's bullshit. Because most people, whether they're teens or not, they're going to hear it. They're going to be exposed to it. It's everywhere. It's in the schools. It's on TVs. You see shit in the airport. I can't even go to my gym without seeing TV on. You have to be a really strong-willed, powerful person to turn it all off. They're targeting video games now for young people. They're putting this stuff into video games. So they're getting it in video games or radio. George Soros just bought radio for propaganda. They're going to get it on the radio. They're going to have it in movies and streaming on Netflix. They have it in government advertising campaigns. They have it from politicians. Now, they're famous. They idolize Taylor Swift, and she's telling them all this stuff. Don't have kids. Don't do this. Don't do that. It's a whole attack on our system. And that's not even covering the chemicals that are altering our reproduction and all that stuff. Like even computers and laptops can ruin sperm motility. We are surrounded by hell, and we don't even know. We're lobsters slowly boiling in the pot. And I just thought it was insane that I'm being told that, that someone thinks that you could just not see it. And that's what they used to say in the 90s. People who ran film, oh, you can choose not to do it. It's freedom of choice. It's freedom of choice. It's free will. Meanwhile, they have an entire insane system set up right from the beginning against you. And Hollywood is one of its most powerful. There's people right from the beginning of Hollywood. Actors have always had problems. It attracts actors and people who have personality disorders. And if they don't really have one once they get there when they're a child, well, they will have one once they go through that system. They will have one. And it's this whole production to make the population think they're just engaging in something that's fantasy, but they're actually, because they don't realize how easy it is to manipulate people, it actually affects how they behave in real life. And to pretend that it doesn't, I think, is negligent. Absolutely negligent. So that's what I have to say about Hollywood. I showed you Laurel Canyon. I talked about how a lot of stuff came out of that, and it was obviously run by the military. And they're doing a whole bunch of campaigns, and I didn't even show you how a lot of these actors from the 60s and they're singers and performers, were all kids that lived on Navy bases. I believe Jim Morrison's dad was high up involved in the Bay of Tonkin thing that started basically the, oh God, my brain's just frying right now. Started Vietnam War. Like they're linked to people high up, and then you see them in all these scenes, basically being the worst of the worst. And it slowly built up to end an anti-war, basically to end an anti-war stance. Now you could say, well, maybe Jim Morrison rock and rolled to go against his dad because he didn't like that. And I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe. It could be. But it's interesting. It's not just him. It's a whole bunch of them. And they all live in the same area where their influence could be coincidence. But there's awful lot that I'm expected to believe that's coincidence that I don't. So Hollywood Babylon is much more devious. It's much more evil. It's much more pervasive in our lives. And it controls how we think. And it doesn't just create good mythologies. It creates really bad mythologies that makes people do things like enlist in military, makes people behave in different ways. It's a social construction. And they'll tell us when we say, nah, you're born male or female and heterosexuality is the natural, they'll say, you're constructing. That's projection. They are the ones with all the media, the books, the magazines, the films, the PR programs, the government programs, the military, the fucking weather pattern programs. They're the ones with all of these weapons pointing them at us trying to control and construct us. That's all a projection. And I tell you this, and I don't think my guests saw it this way, but it's an inversion of what is to be. It's an inversion of real Christianity. It's an inversion of really good moral values. It's good to be anti-war. It's good to not want war. It's good to want groceries that are affordable. It's good to want healthy, real education that helps your children, not bunk education. But we live in the most craziest of times, and I hope everyone is finding themselves well. I'm going to tie this up. I can't believe I talked this long. I didn't think I was going to be able to. But that is my scene. That is the show today. Prayers for everybody who are affected by the hurricane. And I hope I'm wrong about weaponized weather. I hope it's a natural hurricane. But I don't know. It's possible. I showed you how it's possible. I showed you how they could do it. I showed you how they could create a hurricane easily. And I showed you that there is a division. There is a war in that area. There was a war between the corporations and the people that want to get in there for that lithium. It's like one of the biggest lithium deposits, I think, in America, if not the world. And that there's contention there, and that the locals are saying no because it's environmentally unfriendly and they don't want to destroy the natural beauty. But of course, when it comes to globalists and evil Hollywood productions, and they don't care about that. They'll whine about climate change, they'll whine about the environment, and then they'll start tons of wars, use tons of fuel, kill tons of people, drive their private planes everywhere. Total hypocrisy. It's all propaganda. So remember to question everything, guys. I'm going to tie this one up. And I thank you for joining. I will be back next Wednesday with Dr. Dean Bertram. There won't be a show on Tuesday. But Dr. Dean Bertram will be talking UFOs. So please join me Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern next week.